Hello and welcome to 1000 PS TV. With the Ténéré models, Yamaha have absolutely had their finger on the pulse in recent years. Hardly any other adventure bike is built so robustly, comes with such manageable electronics, and is also as capable off-road as the Ténéré. For 2026, Yamaha have now completely rounded off and renewed the World Raid model, the long-distance model of the range, and I was able to ride this bike for you over 300 kilometers here in Sicily. What the World Raid can do that the other two Ténéré models can't, I'll tell you right after the intro. Yes, unbelievable, but true. Between 2020 and 2024, the mid-size adventure bike segment grew by 75% overall. That's a massive number of motorcycles. And Yamaha hold 24% market share in this class with the Ténéré models. So they really are a big player. 86,000 Ténérés have now been sold in Europe. What's also great about the Ténéré is that it's developed in Europe and also assembled in Europe, namely in France. Of course, the parts come from all over the world, the engine from Japan and so on. But still, that's a nice commitment to the European economy. It's also interesting that Yamaha have announced 10 new adventure models for the next 3 years. 10 of them, just imagine that. You almost don't dare recommend buying a Yamaha motorcycle right now because there's obviously so much new stuff coming. And I'm convinced we'll definitely see a small travel enduro with the engine from the MT3 or the R3. So we can be curious. In 2022, the Yamaha Ténéré 700 World Raid launched, and now it's finally time for the next big update. In the product range, it now sits alongside the conventional Ténéré 700, the universal version, so to speak, and the Ténéré 700 Rally, which is clearly more off-road oriented. So who is the World Raid aimed at? Quite clearly, long-distance riders, so-called globetrotters, or those who really like traveling and appreciate more comfort and higher cruising speeds. It's clear that with the World Raid, Yamaha have put a bigger focus on tarmac. It has a top speed of 181 kilometers per hour. So at higher speeds, it feels a bit more stable and safer as well. And just to jump ahead a little, the World Raid update includes 4 components. First, the engine is made Euro 5 plus compliant. Second, we get a major upgrade to the Kayaba suspension components. Third, we get lean angle sensitive assist systems. And fourth, there's an upgrade to the electronics package, including cruise control, which a lot of people have really missed so far. What's nice is that the overall weight still hasn't exceeded 220 kilograms. That means it stays the same. Even with the full 23-liter tank, it's still 220 kilograms, fully fueled. Yamaha's CP2 parallel twin is, of course, an old friend. It's used in several models like the Tracer and the MT range. And of course, in the World Raid, we have it too, 689 cubic centimeters, 73.4 PS and 68 Newton meters. Now it's become Euro 5 plus compliant on the World Raid version as well, and that's achieved through ride-by-wire, meaning an electronic throttle, and modifications to the air intake. So the intake system has been revised and you can actually feel a bit more torque in the lower and mid rev range. The mappings have been revised and a 6-axis IMU is now integrated as well. And that makes it possible to implement lean angle traction control, so traction control, and also a drift control. Each of these two assist systems, so traction control and SCS as Yamaha call it, can be adjusted in 3 stages: street, off-road, and off, meaning switched off. On top of that, there's brake control that you can switch on or off. If I understood it correctly, brake control off means the cornering ABS function is switched off. And for the ABS itself, there are also 3 variants: completely off, rear only off, or cornering ABS fully active. Unfortunately, the Quickshifter is not included as standard at the factory, even at around 13,700 euros in Germany or 14,500 euros in Austria. You have to pay extra for it as an accessory. What you can also see here is that the clutch cover has been modified. The point where the clutch is actuated has been shifted by 35 degrees. That used to be in a lot of people's way. The gearbox has also been improved. It's supposed to shift more smoothly now, and they've revised the radiator design too. Up front in the cockpit, a new steering damper is also used. It's 16-way adjustable and has a really good thumb wheel. I have to say, you can operate it well with gloves on. You can feel the clicks perfectly. Compared with the previous model, I really like it. And what I also really like is the new switchgear. You'll know it from the MT9, MT7, Tracer, and so on. There's a lot of discussion about the indicator switch. Personally, I own an MT9 SP and I've got used to the switch. I wouldn't say it's an improvement over the competitors' indicator switches. You don't really need it, but you get used to it and then it stops bothering you. But it's not just cruise control that's integrated here. The whole operation runs via a joystick. And that's a huge advantage compared to the previous World Raid. Back then, there was a thumb wheel on the side that you also had to press in to confirm. And I had a Ténéré 700 model year 2023 with exactly that thumb wheel. And honestly, it mostly just gave me headaches because if you were riding in dust, it kept getting stiffer. And at some point, you couldn't press it in with your thumb anymore. I sometimes had to hit it with my palm just to make it move. And you needed that to switch off the ABS off-road. So yes, it was a bad solution. And now it's been replaced by switchgear that I definitely trust much more for off-road use, with a 6-axis IMU and ride-by-wire. Of course, you also have everything you need for lean angle dependent assist systems, meaning cornering, ABS, and dynamic traction control. Naturally, you can deactivate them off-road. So with the ABS, you can choose whether you only want to switch it off at the rear wheel, whether you want to switch it off completely, or whether you want to ride with cornering ABS. And with traction control, I can also choose between an off-road mode, a road mode, and complete deactivation. So you can see there aren't endless options, but the Ténéré isn't meant to be that. It's not supposed to be an electronics battleship. It's still meant to be kept sensibly simple. Even with these modern assist systems, the idea is that in the spirit of the Ténéré, it should still be an easy bike to operate. What you might miss in the basic World Raid package is, of course, the Quickshifter. It's only optional, not standard. And then it's added on top of the purchase price of 13,700 euros in Germany and 14,500 euros in Austria. So at least in Austria, that's 2,200 euros more for the World Raid than the conventional standard T7 costs. That's what you pay for the technical goodies that are only available on the World Raid. But I actually think most customers won't be deciding between a conventional Ténéré and a World Raid because these are really two different use cases. If you truly want to do long journeys, spend time on the road and be a globetrotter, then the World Raid is definitely a good choice. If, on the other hand, you like riding gravel, doing a TET or an ACT here and there, then you're probably better off with the conventional T7. It's simply a bit more manageable and it's cheaper too. And we all know it. I think hardly anyone leaves their Ténéré 700 exactly as it is. Most people open the wallet again and personalize the bike for their own use case, tailor it to fit. And I think that's what's so great about the Ténéré community. There are loads of tuning and conversion parts on the accessory market, and you can tailor the bike precisely to what you need it for. I've now tested the off-road traction control a bit. I really like it, and I think it's extremely useful for people who aren't that experienced off-road. Nobody needs to be afraid that their own rear wheel suddenly tries to overtake them, but for those who do have off-road experience, you're honestly often better off with traction control switched off. I'm trying that right now. And you get a more direct riding feel. You really feel that fabulous CP2 engine. It's so well suited to off-road riding, much more direct, and you can control it more nicely with clutch and throttle. You simply have a bit more fun. But the other side of that is, if you're not so experienced yet, you still have the electronics as a safety net. With the ABS, it's similar. I have the option to keep the front wheel ABS active. That's even called rear off ABS. And I think that's really good. Even I, as a regular off-road rider, usually deactivate the rear ABS on heavy bikes, but I like having it at the front because if you do an emergency stop, you don't immediately tuck the front and end up on your face. Of course, if you want to, you can also deactivate the front ABS completely. Then you ride around with no ABS at all. And for the road, you now always have cornering ABS available, so you can even afford an emergency stop in a lean on tarmac. The most striking, unique selling point of the Ténéré 700 World Raid is, of course, the big 23-liter aluminium tank. The other models don't have that. It even has 2 filler caps up front. It looks massive, and it's been revised for 2026. It's now 1.5 kilograms lighter than the previous model. The fuel pump has been positioned a bit lower for a lower center of gravity, and the shape has also been revised. And that brings me to a small criticism of my own, because in my view, they could have done a better job here. I'm 1.78 meters, and if I slide forward on the seat, which by the way now extends further up onto the tank and is one piece, no longer two piece like before, then my thighs automatically splay very wide because the tank is still so bulky. And if I want a tighter knee grip, I have to sit so far back that I'm basically not sitting where I want to sit for an active riding position on tight, twisty roads. So it's a bit of a compromise. If I'm honest, I prefer the much slimmer tank solution of the conventional Ténéré. That said, the look of those two filler caps is brilliant. And by the way, the two tank halves are actually separated from each other, so the fuel doesn't slosh from one side to the other and unsettle the bike. Of course, the system does balance out uneven filling between the two halves. But at the petrol station, you really do have to open both caps and fill both sides separately. It's kind of a cool feature, even if it doesn't make things easier. As for the menu operation concept, I have to say Yamaha have done a good job. It's maybe not ultra intuitive, but you learn very quickly what matters. You can quickly switch the individual parameters on and off. I mean, specifically the ABS, traction control, and drift control. There's basically always just the option to choose off-road or road, or to switch it off completely. Although if I completely deactivate traction control, then I also don't have drift control available, of course. As mentioned, the world raid, like the other Ténéré models, makes a bit over 73 PS and 68 Newton meters. And I just want to say that for off-road use, that engine output is more than enough. Nobody needs that much power on gravel. 50 horsepower would actually be enough too. The rest just disappears into wheel spin anyway. But you have to admit that the World Raid is designed for travel enduro riders who cover long distances and spend a lot of time on tarmac, and there you shouldn't expect miracles from this engine output. That doesn't mean it's boring in the saddle. But if you come lazily around a hairpin in third gear and then expect a real punch afterwards, you'll be disappointed. Still, the engine is very elastic, which of course also helps off-road. You can ride the gears nicely from down low. It always takes throttle willingly, it doses beautifully, and it doesn't tend to stall if you're in rough gravel or climbing over roots. You can control everything nicely without the clutch, just with the throttle, without constantly feeling like the bike is about to die. So I really have to say the CP2 engine is a top choice for this mixed use road and off-road. There aren't many other engines that do it this well. And of course, if you want to go racing, the World Ténéré might not be the perfect tool, but for traveling, it's a really good companion. The fact that the World Raid cockpit finally has cruise control and also a speed limiter is a great improvement for me. I think having to do without cruise control on a travel bike is really not ideal, especially when you sometimes have to do motorway stretches or long main roads and you end up with a permanently stiff wrist from holding speed. That doesn't need to happen these days, especially when you already have a ride-by-wire throttle, so I'm very grateful for that. And the second highlight is the 6.3-inch TFT color display. It also has connectivity, so via the Yamaha app, I can load turn-by-turn navigation onto it. And there are 3 different view layouts with different information, either more road-focused or more off-road focused. Finally, there's also this practical ABS button on the left side of the instruments. If I hold it for about 2 seconds, I can switch off the ABS, either completely or at the rear, depending on what was set in the menu beforehand. So the system basically remembers my previous preference, and each time I press it, it applies that without me having to dig through sub-menus again. And if I press the ABS button briefly, the ABS is activated again. So if I turn off the gravel back onto tarmac, I get that safety net back with one move. Those are really well thought out features. And of course, we also have this practical GPS bar. On a travel bike, that's a really good idea. I can mount my sat-nav or my phone up there. The only downside on the previous model was that the tower was relatively soft. There were aftermarket bracing kits, so the sat-nav wouldn't wobble around. And now Yamaha have stiffened this tower with glass fiber, and apparently that problem has finally been solved. I've owned a Yamaha Ténéré privately for 3 years, and there was one thing I wasn't completely happy with, the frame. It's built so that the rear subframe isn't bolted, it's welded, as you can see here. And the exhaust hanger is also part of the frame. That means it's not bolted on with screws, it's actually welded on. So if you fall onto the exhaust and bend that hanger in, you can only bend it back out again. Replacing it isn't really possible, and you always end up bending part of the frame. I find that a shame. And I also don't think this very short distance between the swing arm and the exhaust is ideally solved. Look, I can't even get my finger in there. So if you fall on the exhaust side, it usually pushes the header pipe straight into the swing arm and you already have a scratch in it. Aftermarket exhaust systems often do this better, routing the header higher up here. But from the factory, I think Yamaha could still make the bike more robust and off-road friendly in this area. But of course, that's a question of price. And since the Ténéré is still meant to be offered at an affordable level, it probably won't happen on the next model either. As for wind and weather protection on the World Raid, not much has changed compared with the previous model. Compared with the standard model, you have to say it's clearly better. Especially wind is blocked much more by this wide tank around the knees. You feel a bit warmer, but you pay for that with a wider knee grip. You have to weigh up what you need it for. What I will say though is that while the tank does bother me a bit when sitting, it works quite well when standing. I don't really feel restricted. I can lean forward nicely into the wind in a rally style. I think that's actually quite well done. Yamaha have really upgraded the 2026 World Raid suspension. It's still Kayaba components, but now a 46mm upside down fork instead of a 43mm fork. That means the yoke has been adapted as well. 230mm of travel at the front, fully adjustable damping, preload adjustable. And at the rear, also a Kayaba shock with reservoir, a hand wheel for preload, and of course adjustable rebound and compression, 220mm of travel at the rear. And I have to be honest, on the really poor roads we've got here in Sicily, it's like riding on a cloud. The ride comfort, touring comfort in terms of suspension is genuinely brilliant. Off-road, the World Raid had to swallow quite a bit today as well. Deep water runoffs, you barely notice them. I really have to say these Kayaba components are excellent. You don't need to invest in aftermarket parts. You can take this from the factory, and with an average rider weight, at least like me, I'm around 70 kilograms, a little over 70, you get on very well with the base setup. As for wheels and tires, there's nothing major new. We have spoked wheels, of course, with a 21-inch front wheel and an 18-inch rear wheel. On the rear, there's a 150 tire, and for the first fit tires, Yamaha are still using the Pirelli Scorpion Rally STR. An all-round tire I know very well. I've ridden it a lot, and I'm genuinely convinced by it. On tarmac, you can lean it over like on any touring tire, really. You don't need to be afraid that because it has a chunkier tread, it performs badly. In the rain, it's absolutely fine too. And off-road, for gravel roads, it's more than enough as long as the gradient doesn't get too extreme. If it gets really steep, up or down, I prefer a 50/50 tire, like a TKC 80, for example, or a Trail Max Raid from Dunlop. But honestly, for gravel roads like what you're seeing right now, you don't need more than the Pirelli Scorpion Rally STR. If you plan more serious off-road with your Ténéré World Raid, then you can invest in a proper aggressive tire set. But for this, absolutely not necessary. The STR does it perfectly. The rider sits at 890mm seat height on the now one-piece saddle. And I do have to say, for shorter riders, that's a challenge, especially if they don't have much off-road experience. If you're more experienced, you can usually cope with tall bikes anyway. But for novices, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it because if we're honest, the Ténéré World Raid with its big tank is a bit intimidating at a standstill. You have to manhandle 220 kilograms fully fueled, and the center of gravity is quite high. So my recommendation is, for people with some off-road experience and who aren't extremely short, no problem. Anyone with a more limited body height has to decide for themselves whether they have the riding skill to get this big bike around without dropping it. Speaking of dropping it, Yamaha say they've adjusted the side panels so the covers cope better with a tip over. I hope I don't have to test that today. Also quite nice in the cockpit on the right side, a USB-C port with a waterproof cover that lets me power my sat-nav or phone right here. Other small improvements on the 2026 World Raid include a new braided steel brake line at the front brake, also a 3-part engine bash plate with side sections and a central section, and they've better protected the side stand switch, which is very exposed in crashes. It happened fairly often that someone fell in the dirt and then the bike wouldn't start anymore. And finally, in terms of accessories, there will be 3 packages in the future: the Sport package, the Explorer package, and the Adventure package, with different accessory components from Yamaha's catalog that you can buy separately. The World Raid is available immediately at Yamaha dealers. You don't have to wait anymore. If you want to set off on a world trip right now, you can. To wrap up, here's my personal conclusion from the test ride. First of all, what impressed me most? That was clearly the suspension. The World Raid now has suspension that's on a par with the rally version of the Ténéré, and I have to say it's incredible how these Kayaba components, especially this high-end Kashima-coated Kayaba fork, respond so sensitively, and how they just iron out bumps on both gravel and tarmac. That's really impressive, and it gives you such a secure feeling on the bike. For me, that's the absolute highlight. The second point that really mattered to me was cruise control. I already said it in the video. On the motorway and on longer trips, for me, it's an indispensable feature, and I'm glad it's now available on the World Raid. With the assist systems, I'm a bit torn. I think any element that improves safety is welcome. But I also believe that with 74 PS and especially off-road, traction control and slide control aren't necessarily essential. These are bikes where if you take on riding 220 kilograms off-road, you should, in my opinion, bring a certain basic knowledge and riding technique with you. And then you can control 74 PS quite well, especially since it's a heavy bike. That said, if you want the assist systems, if you value that safety net, and if you're not yet that experienced off-road, then it's very well tuned. It works, it isn't overloaded. We only have 2 stages to choose from. You don't need more than that. But it still gives you that safety net. If you open the throttle too abruptly, you don't instantly get spun around. The rear wheel is caught again, you keep going in the right direction, and you don't tumble down a slope somewhere. Other than that, I have to say Yamaha have done everything right with the World Rate upgrade and met my expectations. They've taken a proven model and improved it in many small components without watering down the original character of the Ténéré. Because what is a Ténéré to me? For me, the Ténéré stands out because they tried to build a very down-to-earth, fault-resistant bike with little nonsense. That's why I bought a Ténéré back then. Because with its manageable electronics, I dared to head into the wilderness, and I was never afraid I'd be stranded out there. And the World Rate still gives me that feeling. Yes, it has more electronics now, but still in a moderate amount, and I still feel you can have real adventures with it and not be afraid of getting stuck out in the middle of nowhere and then having to hit the emergency call button, whether you've got one with you or not. In the end, you do have to be clear. The World Rate is a compromise bike. On the one hand, in terms of comfort, on the other, in terms of off-road capability, but that's how I am too. I'm an all-rounder. I can't do anything perfectly, but I can do everything a little bit, I think. And for people like me, this bike is the right choice. I can take the Ténéré off-road without being afraid of breakdowns or the bike being overwhelmed. I'm probably the one who reaches the limit first. And on long travel stages, I still have enough comfort that I don't have to suffer. So I think the World Rate is a very successful motorcycle. The upgrades were made exactly in the right places. And yes, that's it from me again from the presentation of the Ténéré 700 World Rate 2026. I hope you enjoyed the ride along with me. If you did, please leave me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'm looking forward to being out and about with you again soon.